Mike Flanagan has departed, perhaps only briefly, from the horror genre with his latest film, The Life of Chuck. I've yet to piece together my review of that film or even really decided if I'll do one, but another recent horror movie does deserve a shout out, in my opinion, so let's dive into The Woman in the Yard. Hello, my name is Sean Morgan, and I love movies. I especially love horror movies, so when Jaume Collet-Serra returned to the genre with The Woman in the Yard, I was pretty intrigued. I like his movies well enough, and I thought the trailers were quite memorable for this particular movie. I have a soft spot for 2005's House of Wax. I really like The Shallows, that came out in 2016, and I honestly even vibe with his non horror projects like Jungle Cruise and Black Adam, which I kind of really did have a good time with in the theater, if I'm being honest. I'm not sure if that's sacrilegious. Both of those two films went down pretty smooth for me. The man is not exactly an auteur, but I do like more of his films than dislike them. With The Woman in the Yard, director Jaume Collet-Serra delivers a quietly haunting, deliberately paced psychological horror film that trades jump scares for dread and spectacle and suggestion. Released in early 2025, the film stars Daniel Deadweiler in a commanding performance as a woman who is unraveling, or perhaps awakening in some respects. This all takes place in a sun soaked home that seems too empty to be real and too haunted for you to really ignore it. While the critical consensus was mixed, The Woman in the Yard, I think, is a bold, unsettling meditation on grief, surveillance, and isolation, bolstered by some striking cinematography, a sparse but effective script, and an unforgettable lead performance from Deadweiler. Produced by Jason Blum under the Blumhouse banner and distributed by Universal Pictures, the film reportedly cost around $12 million dollars to make, a modest figure even by genre standards. The reported worldwide gross is just over $23 million, dollars, which is not amazing as far as what studios typically want. Typically, a movie needs to make double its budget back in the theatrical window to be considered an outright success. This is to factor in costs like advertising and marketing. So while it hasn't reached the breakout status of something like Get Out, hasn't reached the public consciousness level of something like The Babadook, The Woman in the Yard has nonetheless, in my opinion, proven that there's still some theatrical appetite for art house horror with thematic heft. The film got kind of chilly reception from some critics who found its deliberate pacing and open ended storytelling frustrating, but for those attuned to its specific wavelength, The Woman in the Yard is a welcome reminder, I think, that horror can still be kind of weird, kind of quiet, and intellectually provocative, even when made by a big studio like Blumhouse, like Universal. The plot centers around Ramona, played by Daniel Deadweiler, a single mom raising her two kids in a sort of rundown house. A mysterious woman repeatedly begins to appear in the family's front yard, sometimes spouting vague warnings or unsettling taunts. Is this woman a ghost? Is she a stalker? Is she a projection of Ramona's unraveling mind? Colette Sarah smartly kind of refuses to offer easy answers as the film goes on. Deadweiler, perhaps known best for her searing performance in Till, I think she was kind of snubbed that year as far as awards goes. She brings gravitas and internal complexity to the role. Her performance is great, even when no words are being spoken and no answers to the mystery are being offered. Deadweiler can rely on body language, these micro expressions that she has, these subtle shifts in posture to convey this like increasingly fractured boundary between reality and hallucination. Her portrayal of Ramona is layered with both stoicism and vulnerability. Deadweiler's presence anchors the entire film. The film would not even be half as good without her. Without her, The Woman in the Yard might feel slight, even meandering at times, and with her, it becomes something much, much more engaging. Thematically, I think the film is ambitious, though, even if it resists overt exposition. It's a movie about depression, spirituality, and the struggles of parenthood. A lot of big ideas floating around. And Ramona occupies this home that is a symbol of her life not going as planned. She mourns a loved one while still struggling to continue her duties as a mother. And she confronts an unseen force that may or may not be real. The story touches on issues of mental illness, regret, and of course, the psychological toll of being constantly watched or feeling like you're being surveilled. The constant presence of the titular woman becomes more than just a plot device. It is a metaphor for alienation that can come with mental health struggles and the ways in which we internalize those issues, and that can then lead to for lashing out at loved ones in some cases, in as we see with Ramona here. Colette Serra, whose previous films include the aforementioned Shallows and also Orphan, and several recent action blockbusters that I also mentioned, weirdly enough, with Dwayne Johnson. He returns to horror roots here, but with an interesting level of restraint. There's like a confidence in how little he shows in terms of violence or blood. Shadows loom large in the frame when the titular woman starts to creep into things as more of a corporeal kind of villain. The house's brutalist angles are creepy. The foliage in the yard swirls around, and the fading light of day, I think, is also very effective in the film. The film's use of space is often quite affecting. The scariest moments come not from what we see directly, but what might be hiding just out of sight. The woman in the yard is rarely shown clearly. She's more silhouette than visible character. She is a flicker of movement behind a window, a shape between branches of a tree, a suggestion rather than a big like monster reveal. It's kind of old school horror craftsmanship in that way. I think it works quite well here. The cinematography also is crucial to the film's successes, I think. Um, the house in the film is bathed in this kind of golden light that becomes more and more oppressive instead of comforting as the ticking clock to night charges on and the anxiety of Ramona deepens. The result is a film that feels, slowly suffocating, where you're just like waiting and waiting to see what happens when the sun finally goes down. And, while critics have been pretty divided, some citing, ambiguous storytelling, lack of conventional scares as weaknesses. The film, I think, it earns some quiet praise from me, and I think hopefully from some other viewers who are seeking a more introspective brand of horror. It's a film that prioritizes mood and metaphor over like Monster of the Week thrills, and there's nothing wrong with Monster of the Week thrills, but this is kind of a refreshing breath of air in that respect. The Woman in the Yard doesn't really hold your hand in a lot of places too, and for some that might be a turnoff. For others, it's exactly what makes the film compelling. In the final act of the movie, the film flirts with revelation, but never fully really tips its hand into some sort of lore dump or explicit explanation. Although, if you're really paying attention, you can pretty much understand exactly what's going on. Ramona confronts the figure in the yard in a sequence that is both spooky enough and, cathartic for the characters, but the film resists some traditional horror payoffs. There is a climactic battle, but not really in the traditional sense. Things get a little abstract at a certain point in the third act and during the climax, particularly compared to what I have come to expect from a studio like Blumhouse. Whether the woman in the yard is like a real tangible being or not becomes less important than the fact that Ramona finally sees herself clearly and has some clarity regarding her mental state, her acuity, the level of help that she needs and is ready to accept, etc., etc. I don't want to spoil too much, but that feels like the more important thing than just does she stab the demon with the right ancient artifact and that's the correct MacGuffin, so it's dead and we can all go home. That's not what this movie does. In the horror landscape of 2025, I think The Woman in the Yard stands out as a singular kind of powerful movie in some ways. It won't be for everybody, but it isn't trying to be. It's a mood piece, it's a character study, and it's a ghost story, and all of those things are folded into one. It takes some big swings in terms of its themes, and I think it mostly connects thanks largely to Deadweiler's performance and Colette Serra's experienced enough direction. In a genre that's often dominated by formula, I think The Woman in the Yard dares to whisper for the most part, whereas others may scream, if you will pardon the pun. And sometimes a whisper is a lot scarier than a scream, and this film knows it. For that reason, on my scale of A list, A amazing, average, A abysmal, or needs to be A polished, The Woman in the Yard will be getting an average rating from me, but a very solid like 3.5 stars if I were to convert that into kind of a numerical, out of five number. I think more people should check it out. I really do. I believe it's on Peacock right now since it was a universal release. I had a really, really good time with it. I saw it way back when it actually came out in theaters, and I really I had a good time. I saved $10.99 on this film by using AMC A List. And I say this not because I'm sponsored by A List. I'm not. I say this because I plan to tally my savings using the service at the end of 1 year to see if it was actually worth having. I liked this movie quite a bit, so saving $11 here was perfectly fine by me, no complaints. But what did you think of The Woman in the Yard? Did you see it? Do you plan to check it out? I know there's tons of horror gracing us this year, so it is kind of hard to keep up. What's been your favorite horror movie this year? I would love to know that. So far, I have really, really liked Sinners, as many people did. I also really, really dug Bring Her Back. Maybe I'll do videos on those sometime soon. But feel free to answer those questions below. Feel free also to like this video and or subscribe to the channel for thoughts on more features as they hit streaming or come to theaters. Until next time, please don't confront any weird women in your yard. Today is not the day. Thank you for watching again. Bye.